Hello, tailoring talkers, and welcome to Tailoring Talk with your host, Roberto Revilla, bespoke tailor and owner of Roberto Revilla London Suit and Shirt Makers. It's the podcast where I take you on a journey around the globe. We'll either be talking tailoring or I'll be tailoring the talk. We'll meet a host of amazing human beings, creators, self-starters, performers, and more to learn about their journeys and the lessons they've learned. They share their top tips and life hacks to guide you on the path to success. Please support my show by subscribing, and it helps so much if you take a few seconds to rate and review. I'm absolutely giddy today as I'm joined by a creator who has amassed a following of nearly 2 million YouTube subscribers to his Photoshop training channel. I'm very proud to tell you that I'm one of them. He's a graphic artist who has worked as a finisher in Hollywood, creating film and TV posters for HBO, HULU, Netflix and CBS. He's also a global speaker and in 2019 was named one of Cal State's 40 under 40. Here to share his story and provide some valuable tips for all of you budding creators out there, please join me in welcoming Jesus Ramirez to the Tailoring Talk Show. Jesus, how are you?
I'm doing well, Roberto. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here. Obviously, in our pre-talk, I was completely geeking out over you. I'm so glad that you're still on the recording and that you didn't log off the call because you got freaked out. Where are you? Oh, that's it. That's what I didn't ask you. You're based in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, just outside of it. I'm south of San Francisco. I'm actually closer to San Jose, California.
Yeah. Wow. We have had a lot of your fellow Californian natives on the show recently. I don't know why suddenly we seem to be kind of gravitating towards the West Coast. But yeah,
it's the
like
best
welcome.
Coast.
It's the best. The West Coast is the best.
West
I
Coast,
love that.
best
I've
Coast.
never heard that before. I've never been to the West Coast. I've only ever been to the East Coast.
You will love it. East Coast is great. Don't get me wrong. A lot of cities. I love a lot of places in the West Coast. So, East Coast as well.
Yeah, but as I'm building a network of friends over on the West Side, I cannot wait for the day that we make it out there. So yeah, I'm intending to do like the whole of that East Coast up and down. So I just need to try and find a month that I can take off from everything to do that.
And you're in London,
anyway,
correct?
I am. Yeah, London, the one in England.
The one in England. So the first time I've been to England many, many times, but the first time that I went, I had already started doing the kind of work that I do now. So I had a lot of people who I've met throughout the years traveling or through my YouTube channel that for about a week, I didn't need a hotel. I just kept going to different people's homes, and even people I've never met that I just knew from the internet allowed me into their home and took me around places. So it you definitely can make friends from all over the world and save money on hotel rooms if you travel somewhere.
Exactly. And you've got another friend in London who, when you make it back out here, hit me up and you're more than welcome to stay with us. We'd love to have you.
Sounds great.
Cool. So, I guess so you were the first person in your family to graduate from college, which was obviously a huge deal. Could you just take us a little bit take us back to when you were growing up and give us a bit of a flavor for what that was like in your upbringing?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Mexicali, Baja California, Mexico, which is in the border with California. Literally the hospital that I was born was maybe 2 miles from the border with the US. My dad was born and grew up in Los Angeles, California. So my dad's side of the family is American. My dad, as an adult, decided to move to Mexico, to Mexicali, where he met my mother. And my mom is from that area of Mexico. So I was born there. Then as a 9-year-old, almost 10, my parents decided to move to the US, to the Bay Area, where my dad grew up. He was born in LA, but grew up in the Bay Area. And my dad and I actually went to the same high school. But his first language is English, second language is Spanish. Mine is Spanish first, English second. I was an immigrant, but he is not. So even though my dad's childhood home is there, my grandmother still lives to this day, my grandmother's still alive, and she lives at the same house where my dad grew up. in Alameda, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, um, it was an interesting dynamic because I was always an immigrant, but they weren't. I was learning English. My entire family already knew English, so it was an interesting dynamic in that sense. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. No, as I mentioned, out of my, I don't know any of my relatives who had graduated college. I'm sure maybe my dad had a cousin or something that
Mm.
I never met. Who knows? But in terms of my uncles, cousins, siblings, like nobody had graduated college. Nobody that I knew in my close family had a career. Everyone had a job. It's
Yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of thing. Um, so it was quite a difficult childhood in that sense because I mean it's interesting to see because a lot of people talk about and, I hate to sometimes get into these conversations just because I don't want to come up say the wrong things, but a lot of people talk about quote unquote privilege, and one of the things that people don't
Mm.
realize is sometimes privilege could be as simple as the mentality that gets put into you as a child. And what I mean by that is like my parents' goal in life for me was to be, quote unquote successful, which I believe is every parent's goal in life for their children. But what does that mean? And I remember, just like, oh, your goal is going to be to work at a store or to work at a restaurant, make $10 an hour, which is just slightly above minimum wage. Like that's the type of mentality that gets put into a lot of children in these communities, which I think is very detrimental. I was very fortunate that I was poor in an affluent area,
Yeah,
which that allows you to see other people and how other people live and make a living. And I've always had this mentality that success leaves clues. So I've always seen successful people and I kind of try to figure out what they do. And in the beginning, it was not like, YouTube didn't exist and, like didn't even think about being a graphic designer or anything like that. But it was more like, oh, this person is a doctor. Like, how do they do it? Oh, they went to college. Cool. I got to go to college, and I started seeing that um, in my world at that time, everybody who had what I consider success knew how to do something. They just knew how to do something. They were
yeah,
either a carpenter, they, whatever. Like they knew how to do something. So in my mind, I needed to learn how to do something, and it was just a process of figuring out what that something was. But that was basically my childhood. It's funny because my girlfriend, she is highly intelligent, like the most intelligent person that I know, and it's so funny because she was one of the opposite of me as a child. She grew up, reading and top of her class and all this stuff. To this day, if we're, how sometimes couples might be, I don't know, looking at a menu or looking at a newspaper or something together, and they're both reading. It's so funny that she reads so much faster than me. And I'm just like, wait, I'm still in the first line. Hold on. And she already read the entire page. And I'm saying that story just to, you know, as a kid, I never read anything. Like people talk about books, like I never read. I started reading books now as an adult in my 30s, So it, going back to that statement I made earlier, when people talk about privilege, that's something that a lot of people don't think about is like all these little things that as a child you don't get, and
yeah,
that does set you back in life, in my opinion. So it makes it more difficult to reach a higher level if your starting point is already lower, you
yeah,
know. So
totally. This
yeah.
is, I totally, don't feel either nervous or apprehensive about sharing that. You're talking to someone who can empathize to a great degree with a lot of what you've said. I mean, me
Mhm.
growing up, my father, when I was a small child, I remember when my sister was born, I was 5 years old, and my
Mm.
dad was, I think he was running like three jobs. Like he was a
Wow.
salesman, he was fixing light bulbs in a factory, and I can't
Mhm.
remember what the other one was. But and then I remember him being on the phone to my mom and telling her, "Okay, they've said you're ready to come home, but you need to make something up, and you need to stay in that hospital for as long as possible because I can't afford to feed 4 mouths right now."
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. And when he started his own business, um, my childhood was basically as soon as the school bell went, I knew that my dad would be outside the school gates in his van, he was in floor coverings like carpets and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and he would be there to pick me up. Very often there'd be rolls of carpet, kind of through the van, and then sort of, where the passenger seat was, because they were longer than the van, so they'd be kind of sticking out the window. So I would
Right.
have to get in the back of the van, which was not very glamorous at all, while my friends were being picked up in fancy cars and stuff. I mean, it wasn't really that fancy a school, but compared to what we had,
Relatively speaking, right.
relatively speaking, yeah. I mean, so I'd have to get in the back of the van, which was embarrassing in itself. And as a minority kid back then in the 80s and 90s, I mean,
Hmm.
it's like, Mom, Dad, how many things do you want to give other kids a reason to beat me up for?
Hmm.
And then he would turn around through the hatch and he would say, "Have you done your homework? Have you got any homework?" And I knew what he wanted, so I would
Hmm.
always say, "Yeah,"
Yeah.
or "No, there is no homework," or "Yeah, I did it during my lunch break," because I knew that I would then have to go with him to go work, to go deliver or fit things or whatever, and we might not get back till midnight, and
Hmm.
then I would have to do my homework after lights out with a pen torch. And
Yeah.
then, so that was basically my childhood. I don't remember much of ever being able to go out with friends and so on. And, growing up, where, now I see my clients' kids, they have so much opportunity.
Hmm.
And, part of me as I get older thinks, lazy little bastards, what is this new generation that we're breeding? We're completely ruining them. And I do not want to be
Yeah.
in the workforce or even in this country when they all get into power.
Hmm.
But sorry for any of my clients' kids that are listening. I love you all very much. Um, but try and do some work. But it seems to me, my perception is they haven't heard the word no as much as I did when I was a kid
Hmm.
growing up. And, the world seems to be their oyster. I'm kind of generalizing here. Now I'm getting nervous talking about this. But, for me, it's like, my mom and dad would always tell me, "Don't fly further than your wingspan."
Mm. Good advice.
And I was always kind of like, but isn't that kind of limiting?
Well,
But it was very much that, well, you're born working class, don't try looking through the ceiling to the next level above, because we are what we are.
I mean, do you think she meant it that way? Because the way I heard it is almost like when you're drinking water, just don't try to pull the entire glass over your
Hmm.
face to get wet. Just a steady slope, like a marathon rather than a sprint. Maybe I don't know. That's how I
Oh
heard it when
no.
you. No, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, you're a lovely person.
Thank you.
But no, she didn't mean it like that. So yeah, so for me growing up, it was all about trying to get the hell out of there so
Right,
that I could be set free, because I felt like my
makes
wings were
sense.
being clipped.
Okay.
So yeah. Anyway, but enough about
No,
that.
no, but again, I can totally relate to what you're saying because when I graduated high school, the day after, my dad comes to me and says, "All right, great. Now that you graduated high school, you're going to start working construction and doing." He was working as a roofer at the time. You're going to start doing roofs with me, and I said, "No, I'm not doing that."
No, I don't want to
And
do roofs with you. It's the same for me. I don't want to fit
yeah,
carpets. Like,
right.
why would I want
And
to do that?
again, it's God bless you if you do that and if you enjoy your job and all that. But that was just not for me.
Yeah.
And at the time, I graduated high school at 17, so I was on my way to being 18 years old. Wasn't 18 yet, and I said, I'm going to go to college. I got to learn how to do something. I don't know what I'm going to learn how to do, but I know that it's not going to be roofing. I got to go learn how to do something. Prior to that, I realized that I wasn't going to be very good at manual labor because when I was about 15 years old, for a couple, even though I grew up in the Bay Area, for a couple of years we lived in Southern California, in Coachella, and Coachella is well known these days because of the big concert that they do there once a year.
Yeah.
People might be familiar with the one time they did the Tupac hologram on stage. That was in
Yeah.
Coachella. So I lived in Coachella for 2 years, and my freshman year of high school, I did in Coachella Valley High School. And then came back to the Bay Area after that, after freshman year. But during the 2 years that I was in Southern California, I was living near my mom's brother, my uncle, whose name is also Roberto. And my uncle told me, hey, do you want to go make some money? And I was like, sure. I was 14, 15 at the time. I'm like, what are we doing? She said, we're going to go pick dates. And I was like, oh, okay. And Coachella is a farming community, and there's a lot of different types of farming that you can do, including palm trees with dates. And I said, all right, we're gonna go pick dates. And Roberto, I did it for no more than 2 hours. And I was like, no, like there's no way I'm doing, like, no, like, I'm sorry. Like I to him, I probably sounded like a privileged, young kid who doesn't want to work,
Yeah.
was my perception at the time. But I told him, I'm sorry, but look, there's no way I'm doing this. And like that was so ingrained in my head that I needed to learn how to do something, go to school, like figure something out, because there was no way I just couldn't do it. And I
Yeah.
didn't understand how other people could do it. And, I mean, now that I'm older, I understand, some people just need to do it to, feed their families, and it's, honest work. But at the time as a kid, I definitely did not see myself doing that in the future. So I had that experience in the back of my head when my dad said, you got to go work roofing. And I said, no, I'm going to go to college. And my dad and I had an argument about me going to college. And it's usually the other way around, right? The dad telling the kid, hey, we got to get you to
Yeah,
school.
you got to go to college, right?
Yeah. And the
So
kid
that you
saying, no, I'm going to go backpack through Europe or something. So no, it was the completely the opposite. And my entire life, I was a football player, soccer player here in the US. And so that's really where my main focus was. It wasn't yes, school, but like, I'm going to go to a school where I could play football. And I'm going to say football because that's usually what I say, not because I'm talking to somebody from London, but I do have to say soccer so people realize what I'm really talking about if they're listening in the US.
Yeah,
And
we have a lot of US listeners, yeah,
definitely.
probably good to be considerate to them.
Yeah. So I don't think you guys have these out in England. Maybe you do. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I went to what's known as a community college, which is a 2-year school
Yeah,
rather than a 4-year university. So I ended up going to a 2-year school first. Um, those 2 years ended up being about 3 or 4 years. And then I went to a 4-year university, Cal State East Bay, which I think you mentioned in the introduction.
yeah,
And at that school, I the reason I went to that school is because I started emailing a bunch of football coaches, and only one of them replied, which turned out to be that one. I said, "Well, that's where I'm going to school." So I just wanted to keep my athletics as I went to school, which was a good motivator too. I wasn't a very good student. I didn't have very high grades in school. For those of you who are listening in the US, I was like a C average student, 2.5 GPA, not, nowhere near the top at all. So sports did help me stay more motivated with school, even though it was something I knew that I wanted and needed. It wasn't something that I was highly motivated about. And now as a much older adult, I wish I would have been, but it is what
yeah,
it is. And so in this school is where Cal State East Bay is where I decided to get into graphics. Something I hadn't mentioned earlier is that I've always been sort of like an introvert kid. I was never, into partying or any of that. And I didn't have my first drink of alcohol till I was in my late 20s, almost 30. Now I love wine. I'll have a glass of wine every night. But prior to that, I wasn't the kid that you would find at a nightclub partying and drinking. And what I was really into is I was a nerdy kid. I was into drawing comic books, since still I am a big Spider-Man fan. And I was
oh, me too.
really,
I had the very last Todd McFarlane.
mm, wow.
It was around about, I think that issue was probably about 89, 90,
Mhm.
somewhere
Yeah,
when he stopped drawing Spider-Man.
yeah, yeah.
He
He created
I had the
Venom.
very last McFarlane. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I was a big fan of Spider-Man, Todd McFarlane, all these people. And for a while I wanted to be a comic book artist, but I wasn't nowhere near as good to even consider that as a career path. But in my mind, I kind of wanted to do that. And I was also really into computers. Computers were starting to get big. I graduated in high school in 2000. At least in my area, that's when computers really started to hit. I mean, just for context, my freshman year of high school, I still took typewriting class with a typewriter, like not an actual computer, but like,
Yeah. No, I remember
yeah,
the click. Yeah.
yeah. And we had a fancy one that had a backspace button that would use whiteout to like erase the
No.
last character or whatever. So anyway, So that's what the time frame that I was in. So I was getting really into computers. I mean, I still remember installing Windows, what was it, like Windows 2000 or whatever it was, the one after 98,
It
or
was
XP.
Windows 95, then Windows 98, then it was Windows 2000. Yeah.
And yeah, I think I remember installing Windows 2000 on one of my computers. But anyway, the point is that I was really into computers, really into drawing. Now I'm at this 4-year university and I have to figure out what I'm going to study. So they had a program called multimedia, which eventually became graphic design. But at the time it was multimedia. So it's really the same thing. They just kind of switched the name after some time. And I thought, I like computers and I like drawing. So I guess this multimedia thing seems like it fits, and that's how it started.
Yeah. So as I guess as an illustrator or graphic artist, it was electronic form rather than hand drawn. Is that right?
So the long answer is I had a lot of hand drawn experience because of my
Yeah.
interest in comic books and all of that. In part of this graphic design program did include some traditional media, but it was not the focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that obviously then set you on the path to what would become your career.
Yeah, but I mean,
Um,
it was a long path. I mean, I graduated from university at I was about 27, 28. And by the way, my entire career, academic career, no achievements of any kind, no, peaks that I could look back and say that was a great year when it came to schools. Even with grades, grades were never my thing. And I'm going to skip ahead just to mention this. You
yeah,
mentioned it
go
in
for it.
because I completely forgot that happened. In 2019, I was awarded one of the 40 under 40 awards from my university. Just before I turned 42, so I managed to squeeze in there, and it's so funny because this is my only award I've ever received from any school, but it had nothing to do with my academics. Rather, this guy's successful. He went to our school. Let's just give him something. you know?
Right. Okay. Was it? But that's because they I guess they'd seen your success by that stage on YouTube.
Yeah,
Because you started your channel when, like 2011?
2012.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, 2012. And by then I had already pretty much every accolade that I put in my bio had already happened by that
Yeah.
point. So so I was one of the 40 people that got nominated that year, and I got the one of the awards. And I went to it was so funny going to that award ceremony, because I don't know, like I just felt like, like that imposter syndrome never goes away. Like
Yeah.
oh God, like what am I doing here? Like I see, like, I don't know, doctors and, like, people curing cancer, and here I am with a YouTube channel. Like what the hell, So it was an interesting experience, but at the very same time, I felt proud that, like it was never like, I feel proud because I feel that I've done something that wasn't supposed to happen. Like I wasn't supposed to do a lot of things and then ended up doing them. And I think that the only reason that those things happened was because I worked very hard. I don't like to think as myself as someone who is smarter than anyone or better than anyone. Like, but if there is something that I'm willing to, like, give myself credit for, is that I'm willing to work harder than anyone. Like that, I
Hmm.
will give myself credit for.
Yeah. Exactly. That was always my thing as well. Is that until I work out what it is I actually want to do in life, whatever it is
Hmm.
that I'm doing, and I look at everyone around me, take the good stuff,
Hmm.
don't do the bad stuff, and
Hmm.
then do it more than they're doing it. Like
Yeah.
outwork
Hmm.
everyone.
Exactly.
Um, and that always held me in good stead. But you did always kind of have a goal. You always knew at the very, very least that there was something you needed to be good at
Yeah,
and
for
be a
sure. For
specialist
sure.
in.
There was no doubt that there was something in the back of my head. But it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? The mentality, like a lot of times people talk about, if I could, if what I knew now, I would have known when I was 18, I would rule the world. And my mentality's never been that. My mentality is, if I had my mindset I have now, like I don't need to know what I know now, just the mindset. And
Yeah.
that what was lacking when I was younger. The mindset was just not there. I mean, I just mentioned to you that I pride myself in working very, very hard, but that's a newer thing. That didn't start happening until I was in my mid-20s. There was glimpses of it as a child, but it didn't set till much older, till I was much older. Um, One of the, and I do have to give credit to someone that completely changed my mind. I used to work so right after university, I started working as a designer for Motorola. Some people may remember the old phones and other
Oh yeah,
products.
I had a StarTAC.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that they also had
The Razor
the
was their big one, I
Razor,
think.
the
Yeah.
Razor. Yeah, I remember having that phone.
Yeah, so I was working with them slightly a few years after the Razor came out, if I remember correctly, maybe a year, who knows, around that. I remember working there after the Razor had come out. Let's put it that way. And I worked there so I got a contract job, and who knows how things are ran these days. I'm talking about 2007-ish, 8-ish at this point, but it was a contract job so I wasn't a full-time employee.
Right.
And when I got hired, they said something along the lines of, it's going to take a really long time for you to get hired as a full employee and get all the benefits that a full employee gets, which I thought was BS. And there had been some people on my team who had been a contractor for the guy that had been the longest as a contractor was about 5 or 6 years. And I was like, oh my God, 5 or 6 years and you won't be a full-time employee and not get all the benefits. And it just felt nasty. So that was like a strike for them, in my book, at least. Side story. I was so good at what I did, and I worked really, really hard because at the end of the month, they would give the equivalent of like employee of the month, right? Who was the most productive, who did, whatever boxes they wanted you to check, whoever checked most those boxes the most got, recognition. And it wasn't anything. It was just like, hey, this month was Roberto. Hey, Roberto, good job this month, and a little clap, and that was it. But I wanted to be that every month.
Yeah.
So the side story is that about maybe 8 months into me working at Motorola, they offered me a full-time position. So it kind of benefited me in that way. But I didn't like the culture. I'm not someone who is into, which is funny that I do really well now with like being I'm a business owner. I do have people that work for me, because I'm not really like into meetings. I'm not into like I like to sig and sag, as I don't know. I just didn't like the process, and I wasn't really into like the cubicle life and all that stuff. Um, so I had a lot of altercations with people working there because, in my view, I was being more efficient and doing work faster and better. That following their rules was just going to slow me down. So I actually
Yeah.
got written up a lot of times, and one of those times I thought was really unfair. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a Spanish speaker. And so the department for Motorola that I worked in partnered with AT&T here in the US, which is a phone company. At the time, and who knows if they're still around, but at the time they had the like the Yellow Pages department as part of AT&T, which meant that some of the designs we're creating were actually not for Motorola themselves. They were for AT&T's customers, meaning normal people running small businesses.
Hmm.
So part of my job was to create, say, a design or website design for like a hair salon or something like that. So it
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily working for Motorola themselves. It was more for their clients, which included their clients, and some of these were small business owners. And these small business owners sometimes will need to call in the design department to say, hey, you guys made a mistake in this design or the web or they needed assistance. And part of our service was to talk to these clients. And I got a phone call once, and I was talking to a client who clearly was not an English speaker. He was struggling a lot. Based on the person's name, I assumed they were Spanish speakers. So I said, hey, do you speak Spanish? He was like, oh, yes, I do. And I was like, great, let's handle this in Spanish. So we handled the situation in Spanish. Great. At the end of of that call, I get one of my supervisors coming over and says, hey, you're not allowed to speak Spanish to the customers. And I said, why not? And they said, well, AT&T is not paying us to do bilingual support. So you have to speak in English. If they want to pay for bilingual support, then they have to pay us extra. And I said, okay, but then have them pay us extra because I couldn't understand this gentleman in English. And I can
Yeah, and
definitely,
he couldn't articulate his problem, and he couldn't get help.
yeah. So what am I going to do? Just sit here for 2 hours and not, I solved this issue in 10 minutes. Anybody else would have picked up this call. We would have been here 2 hours, like it's just waste. In my mind, that was just a waste. To make a very long story short, I will get into trouble for situations like that where I would find a solution, but no, they have their procedures. And, now that I'm older, I realize that there is some validation, if you will, to their point. Still, I disagree with it. But now I realize there's contracts and things and all that nonsense that I didn't care for.
Yeah, but that's
So
why
then,
people like you and me, we would never last long term in
yeah,
organizations like that, where it is so structured and everything is
exactly.
because everything has to be replicatable. And
Yeah.
whilst you can admire, I mean, McDonald's was, when Ray Kroc
Mhm.
took McDonald's from the McDonald's brothers and made it what it
Yes.
is today, it was all based Starbucks and so on. I mean, there are
Hmm.
so many big, but that's why you and I would always be a spanner in the works of the cog of those big
Hmm.
machines
Hmm.
because
I
our
agree.
brains just think differently. It's like when my first tailoring job that I have my own motor story, by the way, which, around the same time as you, actually, before I got my break in tailoring, I love electronics and I love gadgets. And, I applied for a job with Motorola. I went in, I interviewed really well. I
Hmm.
went back for the
Hmm.
second interview. The second interview was a presentation about how I would go into key stores and help to grow Motorola's market share.
Hmm.
And I don't know what they were expecting, but I took it seriously. And I
Sure.
went in and I presented, and I told them how I would take them from where they were to 400-500% growth over a period of 2 to 3 years. You know what? They didn't offer me the job. And when I said to them why, they said it's because they felt I was too overqualified and that if I achieved what I wanted to achieve, they would not be able to pay me what I was worth.
Wow.
I was like, well, I mean, if I manage to achieve what I achieved, then you just take some profit out of that and pay it to
Yeah.
me.
Then boom. Yeah.
But why don't we just kind of sign this thing, hire me, and let's just see where it goes?
Yeah.
Because I can do the minimum, right? But they
Right.
didn't want me. So
Oh
anyway,
man.
maybe thank God they didn't hire me because you and I wouldn't be sat here together today.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Yeah. And
look, look.
the reason I told that Motorola story was because even though that was my first job out of college and I was very excited to get it, that was my first real job. Like every job I had prior to that is I used to work at the mall, at a record store, selling CDs and DVDs. I worked at Little Caesars, the pizzeria. I've worked at a computer store, so like I just had like store jobs. I work at a shop
Mm,
essentially, up until that point. So I was very excited to have an actual, like, oh my God, I have my own badge with my picture on it. It's got a logo that people recognize, so it was exciting. And I did, as I mentioned, I wanted to do well. So I strived to do well, but then I quickly realized that that was not the place for me, even though
yeah.
I was very excited in the beginning. So I only lasted on that job no more than a year and a half, probably, I don't know, a year and a half, we'll say. And at the time, me and a couple of friends decided to start a company that I'm not going to go into too much, but it just went to hell. It was the worst thing to have happen in terms of like being in business with friends, but it taught me a lot of valuable lessons about being in business and starting your
Hmm.
own thing. So even though it was a complete mess, it 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 definitely I got a taste of what it was like to start and run a business, which was
Yeah.
invaluable education. Even though
Yeah.
everything went wrong, it was good for me to see that and be deeply involved in it. So I was without a job, and I don't know if you have Craigslist out there, but it's a website where you log
Yeah.
in and you search for jobs or whatever. And I logged in and found like a small marketing company looking for like essentially like a web developer. And I was like, well, I can do this. So I sent them an email. I get an email back, and this is all within one day. And the guy's like, hey, do you have time? I can talk right now. And I was like, cool, let's talk. And now it's like 6 p.m. in the evening. And this guy interviewed me and he's like, cool, I like you. You want the job, you got it. Just come over Monday. This is like a Thursday or something. I was like, cool, I'll show up on Monday. So I showed up on Monday to this like random place. And the guy's like, yeah, you're hired. I was like, all right, cool. And it turned out to be a small marketing company, 5 full-time employees, about 15 contractors. And the guy, Ben, who owned the company to this day, is a very close friend. And I owe a lot of my success to him. He completely shifted my mindset. I got to see a successful business owner up close every day, how he does things. It was a marketing company, so we were really big into building audiences, really big into building email lists, really big into building a lot of things that make content creators these days successful. So I got to experience that through working with him. Um, I don't know what he saw in me, but he immediately, just started giving me all these random tasks. He would say, like, here's this book, read for whatever reason, The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Oh, here's this book, Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. Oh, here's this, conference. Why don't you go to it and learn something? And his mindset, I assume, is that the more I knew and the more like business minded I was, the better it was going to be for his business, which for a long time it was. I worked for him for about 7, 8 years, including 5 years while I was still doing my YouTube channel. So I was doing my YouTube channel after work. And I just got to see how a small business can generate revenue and all the different income streams. Since I was my official title was like a developer, but I did everything when it came to a computer. So I learned how to create a membership website. I learned we had about this is not a lot of money for like a business, but we had about a $50,000 budget annually on Facebook ads. So I learned how to do Facebook ads, so like I was just learning how to do all this stuff that became very beneficial when I started my own business. So I'm very, very grateful for not only learning the skills through the job, but the complete shift in mindset that he had over me. Like I remember thinking, I never want to be a business owner. Like I never want to I just want to like do my job and go home and relax.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, but I found a greater sense of purpose and a greater like it's funny when I go on vacation, oftentimes I'll hear people say, at the resort or the pool or the beach or whatever, people will say things like, "Oh, I'm back to reality tomorrow. Oh, I hate reality." And I'm like, "What do you like? I love my reality. Like I like the beach, but I also love being here in my office. Like here where you're seeing me sitting down, I literally would spend 10 hours a day and I won't mind it and I love it and this is my comfort zone and to me this is paradise to me." And that's something that I didn't know about, and that through his help, I managed to discover something that I was really passionate about, which is creating and just being in my zone and not just being an employee. And I know that sounds terrible to say just being an employee, but it wasn't for me. And I do realize that everybody has different likes, different mindsets, different ways of seeing the world. But my way of seeing the world is this now, and he helped me shape it, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. And then so now, because you mentioned you were running, you started your YouTube channel and you were doing that in the evenings after
Yes.
work.
Yes.
So what made you start it in the first place? It's always been the Photoshop lessons, right?
Well, here's a fun
Or
fact.
how
No,
to
that's actually the
Photoshop.
second YouTube channel. The first one,
Oh,
I'm probably not going to mention it, but it's still out there somewhere. I was actually teaching, because remember, I was doing a lot of WordPress development at the time,
yeah.
website development. I was using WordPress. So I actually started a YouTube channel about making WordPress websites back in like 2010 or 2011. And because I was getting a lot of ideas, right? I'm working with this guy. I also started um, a soccer blog or football blog. And this is around the time where Facebook was just this is nothing like this today. This is when you would put something on Facebook and everybody who followed you would see it. And everybody
Yeah.
who clicked like, their friends would see it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So things could go very viral very easily. And during the 2010 World Cup, I got my very first taste of what it was like to make real money online. And I had this blog and I was blogging. So as I mentioned earlier, I was born in Mexico. So my blog was specific to the Mexican national soccer team and specific players who were popular at the time. And during the 2010 World Cup, I started posting articles about different things related to the players and teams that I liked, and I would share them on my Facebook. Now, this doesn't work anymore, but at the time, with the Facebook page, you could just hit like on the people's comments, like on a bigger page, and they would get notifications that you liked their page, and then they would follow you back. So I would spend hours and hours and hours a day just doing that, just like. And I realize this is spam and all that, but I was, this again, 2010, I don't know what I know now.
Yeah, exactly. You do what you got to do.
Yeah. And not just because of the likes, but the likes on people's comments was kind of what jump started. But eventually this particular Facebook page got to about 1 million followers. And I started posting articles on this page that would link back to my website. My website had AdSense ads on it. And during the 2010 World Cup, at the peak of popularity for the sport, every 4 years is, the World Cup, without a doubt. There's other peaks, Champions Leagues or whatever. But in 2010, I managed to make $35,000 in 1 month on my AdSense revenue. And to me, that was like, I've never seen that kind of money. And just to put it into perspective, I was in the hole, more than that. Right. So when I saw that, I was like, what? Like, how can this be? And it was like a great awakening, right? So like, oh, you can make money from the internet. Like I said, that was just during the 2010 World Cup. And in total, that was the height of it. Then the next month was like 15. Then the next month was like 8, so it was just that one peak, but then it sparked a lot of ideas. And I thought, well, what am I really good at? Because I can't, in my mind, I was like, I can't just keep doing soccer blogs. It's not going to work. I got lucky with this one. I got to make something where like I am more of like the face of it. And I thought, well, I'm really good at building websites. I'll make a YouTube channel on building websites. So then I realized that was just too complicated, like too many questions that I was just not prepared to answer. But eventually I realized I'm very good at graphics, like really, really good.
Yeah.
I rarely meet people who I consider, and I know this sounds really cocky to say, but who, like, I know people who are better than me. I'm not trying to say that I don't, but very rarely do I come across someone and I'm like, oh, wow, like, I'm very impressed by this person. But I do know a lot, like more than a handful. I know many, many people who are better than me, but
I think 1.93 million people would agree with you. So you have that validation.
Thank you. But I realized, I'm pretty good at graphics. And not only am I good at graphics, I've always been, I guess it's because of the way my mind works. I've always been very good at putting things together in a modular way. Some people are very good at making something look great, but then when you look at the actual file, it's a complete mess in there. And in a production environment, that doesn't tend to do very well, because when you hand the file off to someone else, it's a complete mess and they have a lot of difficulty making any potential changes. And I've always been good at that. I've always been good at being organized and making sure that things don't fall apart once you open up a file. So I think that, so I thought, and not only was I good at it, but it's like what I did for fun. Like when I would, after working at the marketing company or messing around with that blog, what I would do for fun is draw. And what I would do for fun is get into Photoshop and create, like, go look at a movie poster and like replicate it, like, oh, that looks cool. How do they do that? Let me see if I can do it, So it was what I was already doing for fun anyway. And I was good at it. And then I thought, I'm going to make a YouTube channel for people like me, which by the way was a mistake. Like me, like advanced users. And then if you look at my very first like 10 or so videos, they're actually quite advanced. I probably wouldn't do them that way anymore. Once I started thinking more about like, okay, now I have enough content out there. Now I really got to be more conscious about how to serve an audience. I quickly realized that advanced users don't go to YouTube and search how to do this in Photoshop because they know how to do it. So I had to like bring my content to a beginner level, but still keep some of the. I like to think that what sets my YouTube channel apart is that to this day, I'm still working with high-end clients. So I still have my foot on like at a high level professional work environment where a lot of other people who teach on YouTube either don't do it anymore or never did it. So I see a lot of very successful YouTubers who do what I do, and they'll teach something and it's not necessarily wrong, because you get, at the end of the day, what matters is what the image looks like, right? So the
Yeah.
image may look good, but that specific way wouldn't work in a production environment, just because, it's not editable, or it's not easy to change, or there's some issue. Um, and and if you're just someone who's doing it for a hobby, or somebody who's, completely by yourself and nobody else will ever touch the file, then it doesn't matter. But in my world, it does matter. So like I try to teach it in that context.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you, when you started off the Photoshop channel, so you said that the first few videos you did were quite advanced, right? So
Yeah.
obviously, no, the people you were targeting weren't actually there because they didn't need that content.
Hmm.
So then you kind of flip round to looking at, okay, well, I need to help people who pretty much have no clue about Photoshop, right? Because
Hmm.
that's what most people do. They kind of like buy or subscribe to the software, and then they install it, and then they go in there the first time, and one of two things happen. Well, the one thing that happens is they're like, okay, I don't know how to do this,
Hmm.
and then one of two things happen. Either they never open that application ever again, or they go onto Google or YouTube. How do I use Photoshop?
Hmm.
Had you already worked out by then? Because nowadays, when you're looking at any content, like how to start a YouTube channel, how to grow your subscriber base, how to get more views, it's all about um, working out the questions that are being asked the most, and then answering those questions. Did you come from that place, or was it trial and error? Kind of just trying different things out, kind of seeing what the views were, how much attention different subjects were getting.
That's a very good question. It's a very important question, actually. So I am from an era of YouTube where what you just described was the best way to be successful online. Um, for example, a question that is often asked on YouTube, Google, and everywhere for what I do is how to remove a background. So really early on, I realized that there were these keywords that a lot of people were that a lot of people were searching for, and that I realized that
Yeah,
I could target and be number one at. And I worked really hard at it. Like I would, like one of my goals was to get this keyword, and I managed to get it. And it took some time, and it took a lot of trial and error, and it has gotten me millions of views. But that is not where YouTube is today. You can still be very successful targeting those keywords, but the new way that YouTube is working, it's more about retention. So if you manage to get a video that has a lot of retention. So for example, let's say your video is 10 minutes long and people watch 7 minutes of it. Well, then that's about 70% retention rate, right? So that's quite high. Like
yeah,
all these crazy viral videos by Mr. Beast or whatever, they got 80+%. But for like a normal person, 70 would be ideal. For me, it's about
yeah,
50 to 60, depending on the video. But the point is that people who are really good at, I like calling it packaging, really good at packaging content tend to do really well these days on YouTube, and could be even more successful than people who target the keywords like I did back in the day, because um, YouTube is all about retention. So if you manage to package something that is that it's basically like the holy trinity, I like to think about it, is like retention rate, click-through rate, and watch time. So click-through rate is if your video appears in somebody's feed, no matter where, how many times they click on it. The higher that number is, the more they're going to show it to people. After they click, are people satisfied with the video? One of the ways of measuring that is if they watch the entire video, or how much of it that they watch. If the retention rate is
yeah,
high, then YouTube will push it to more people. Watch time, like how many minutes are people watching? Back when I started, the metric was views, right? You get a click, that's a view. But a view is not
yeah,
as valuable as retention rate and watch time, because you can get 100 clicks, but maybe everybody clicks away after 10 seconds because they realize the video is nonsense. But if I have one video and that video gets like a 20-minute watch time, something crazy, then to YouTube, even though this video's got one viewer, obviously I'm just throwing out numbers here, has fewer views, that video is more valuable because it generated more watch time for them. So if you manage to create videos that are that give you high click-through rates with high retention rates and high watch time, they're just going to throw it out through to everybody. And that is great. But the downside is that if you're very good at packaging something, you're going to be very successful, but that doesn't mean that the content itself is good or valuable. In the world that I'm in, I've seen a lot of videos that are highly, highly, highly successful where the content, in my opinion, is not that good, but it's put together so well that it doesn't matter because people keep watching. The person may have great personality, or they might have cool graphics or whatever. So that is a downside. The upside is that if you're a creator who is just starting and you manage to package together a great video, it might go viral even without the millions of followers. So, there's pros and cons to everything, and that's where they are now. So if I were starting a YouTube channel today, which to a degree I kind of am, we were talking about off air that I'm starting a podcast. I'm still considering whether or not for the podcast to have its own YouTube channel or just put the podcast on my YouTube channel. Something there's pros and cons to everything, so I'm still debating.
I think the advice, because I've gone and lumped the podcast because I've just started putting some of the episodes up.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a school of thought, and quite a big one at the moment, amongst the kind of YouTube teaching community, that your channel needs to niche.
Mm-hmm.
So the one of the reasons probably why your channel is so successful is because I know what I'm getting when I come to your YouTube channel.
Yes.
If I suddenly turned up one day to, I don't know, learn how to color correct in Lightroom or remove a background or something, and the latest video that popped up from you was a conversation with me as a bespoke tailor as part of your Talking to Creators series on your podcast, that would kind of be a bit weird. A bit like people watch the Food Network because they like watching shows about cooking food.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, if as one of my previous guests gave the example, he said if suddenly a politician turned up and was talking about their policies, you'd kind of be like, sorry, what the hell?
Yeah.
If you can make it relevant, so a politician turns up to cook their favorite dish on the Food Network, and in the process of that, they might then touch on some of their policies for an upcoming election, but it's still connected with food and all that sort of stuff, then that's kind of okay. So that's kind of got me questioning what I'm doing at the moment, because obviously I took the dust covers off my channel literally about 3 weeks ago. YouTube, whilst we were recording actually live on air, I just got a notification from YouTube Studio that I just got past 10,000 views on my channel.
All right, congrats.
Thank you. You probably find Inside really, really funny because you get millions.
No, it's all a milestone. We've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah, I mean it's anyway. So it's going in the right direction. As long as it's going up, that's the main thing.
Yep, 100%.
But I think the point is that people need to come to your channel, and if they're going to subscribe, they need to know what they're getting, and it needs to be consistent. So I'm thinking of actually starting, because it doesn't cost anything. That's the other thing. It's like with podcasting, it costs me money to do this at the moment, because I'm about half. I'm proud to say I'm now halfway to monetization, because the same as YouTube. With YouTube, you need to have a minimum of 1,000 subscribers and one of two other things. I think it's watch time. Well, you know what it is anyway. You're way past that anyhow. And with podcasting, it's pretty much similar. For people to make your podcast eligible for monetization, you need to have over 1,000 downloads a month. I think actually with Buzzsprout, who hosts this podcast, that's the only criteria. And there are other affiliate platforms you can go to where you can pitch your podcast to people, and they might like you enough and like your content enough to say, hey, yeah, we'll throw you a few bucks a month if you'll insert or advert at the beginning of your podcast. But by and large, the real kind of monetization opportunity comes in when you're getting over 1,000 downloads average per month. We're over halfway to that now,
Nice.
because we just had such a big spike in the last month or so. But again, you know, I have no idea where I'm going. I go off on tangents. I forgot to mention that when we started recording. This happens a lot. Oh yeah, sorry. We were talking about specificity and niching. So yeah, so the general advice basically is that your channel should be what, you need to have a clear label on your channel. So if you imagine a jam jar,
yep,
if people are reading on that jam jar that what they're getting is Photoshop training, then when they open the lid, it should be Photoshop training inside.
Definitely.
It shouldn't be anything else.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they get confused and then they get disengaged, and that's why your primary channel has done so well. So I would probably advise you, which sounds ridiculous, because I'm the student, you're the master when it comes to YouTube.
Not at all.
But my advice, having just made the mistake 3 weeks in, is I would separate the podcast and give it its own channel.
Yeah. So two things come to mind when you're speaking. Number one is you're absolutely correct about the niching part. When I started the Photoshop training channel, I really, really wanted to. It was a conscious decision not to, because I could have, taught Illustrator, After, there are other applications that I know. Photoshop is without a doubt the one I love the most and the one that I know the most, but I know the other ones well enough to teach them. But it was a conscious decision that when somebody thought of Photoshop, I wanted them to think of me. Because if I had tutorials on everything, then they're, what does this guy do? Premiere? Does he do Photoshop? Does he do, what does he do? He does. So I didn't want to be, I wanted to be known as the Photoshop person. And that was very conscious. So I totally agree with your comment on niches, which I think has also been very beneficial in other aspects of my career, like the speaking engagements and all that. There's no confusion as to what I do. So if we need somebody that we need someone to talk about Photoshop, then we know that this is one of the persons that can do that. There's no confusion about that. The second thought I had was that I do agree with your opinion and the opinion of others that you have brought up, which is to divide the podcast to a different YouTube channel. I already have the YouTube channel. That's already, I'm just deciding, do I even post the first episode on my big one so then people know about the other one, or just mention it after the tutorial? That's really where
you could actually have an ad or a thumbnail ad at the end of your videos, or even, where you can do sorry, I'm just learning about this stuff.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
No, I love it. The little caption link in your video, and it's like, hey, check out my new channel.
Right.
The Jesus Ramirez podcast or whatever.
It's called Today's Creator.
Okay, right. Today's Creator. But you could even do that.
Yeah.
Because I think I don't know if within Studio you can actually. I'm really sorry, everyone that's listening. That's like, what the hell's he talking about? You've got YouTube, and then you've got YouTube Studio, which is where we kind of manage our channel, the content, look at how well things are doing, and all the analytics and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know if within Studio you can actually then easily kind of blanket, do a sort of caption link to all of your videos. And for you, it's like, oh my, I'm so excited because
I'm excited as well.
You're just ready to go.
Well, and this is why when you met, just a few moments ago when you were talking about I just got my notification for my first 10,000 views. I immediately thought, oh man, I can't wait to get my notification for 10,000 views on my new channel. So, it's not like
the guy sitting there with the YouTube plaque behind him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's my focus now. It's like, I need to get my channel sorted and straightened out. I need to get it focused, and then, get my 1,000 subscribers, right? So that's my goal for the next 12 months. But more than that, it's to get the channel nailed down so that I'm helping people with the things they need help with.
That's a priority. And that's the priority. In my opinion, the better you serve people, the better your content will do. At the end of the day, I want my videos to do well, and I realize that my videos will only do well if I help people the way they want to be helped. And this is something that I always tell creators, specifically creators who are teaching something. I had to change my style of teaching to better serve the audience, because some of my videos, in my opinion, were good because they had a lot of information, but there's such a thing as throwing too much information at someone. Because as you mentioned, some people are going into YouTube for the first time, looking at how to do something. And if I tell them, this is how you do it, but then you do that, and then you do this, and only do this, if that, if this, and then now they're confused. Where a more, not even advanced, but a more intermediate user will appreciate that. So I had to a lot of the editing I do for my videos is actually cutting out information. I'm like, yeah, this is probably going to confuse somebody. I'm going to cut this out, even though I think is valuable information. It might not everyone might agree. So I have to be really careful about how I just don't want to overwhelm people now. And it goes to the point that I don't want to show off and show everybody how much I know. I rather people get what they came for, and that makes them more likely to subscribe, follow, buy a product or something like that. But I have a story about, you were talking about this plaque. So when I got my 100,000 follower plaque, that went in a drawer. It's right in front of me. I don't have it out. I got that one about 2 years ago, about give or take 2 years ago, and it was under my couch. And the only reason it's here is because this is a new home. I just moved in here last October, and one of my friends, who is some people may know, Colin Smith from Photoshop Cafe, came over to my house and he said, "Hey, where's your YouTube plaque?" And I was like, "Oh, you're sitting on it. It's actually under the couch." So he pulls it out of the couch. He's like, "What the why would you keep that under a couch?" And I said, "Because I don't care. Whatever." And he and other friends really, really encouraged me to at least have it out, not under the couch. So when I moved to this place, it was still in the box, clearly no longer in the couch because I was moving. And I thought, I guess I'll put it out, just because it's been under the couch for 2 years now. So I guess it's okay for me to show it off, if you want to call it that. I'm just not really big into celebrating myself too much. This is the first year I celebrated my birthday last year. So my birthday's in September of 2022 was the first year I ever celebrated my birthday, because I really don't like attention on me. And the only reason I celebrated my birthday is October of 2021. I almost died. I had a stroke.
Yeah.
I collapsed, and I was told I was going to be disabled the next day. I couldn't move my left side, and I was in a walker. And thankfully, hey, I'm back to pretty much normal. Just got to take a pill every day, but I'm back to playing sports. I do have some things I can't do, like ride a roller coaster or anything that will snap my neck too much. But for the most part, I have a normal life. Like I said, playing sports and doing everything. But it took about over 6 months for me to recover, and it was a scary time. And I was very fortunate that I have the job that I have, where I didn't have to worry about money coming in, because even though I wasn't producing videos, old videos were still generating revenue, and I had content for sale that people were still buying. So it wasn't I'm like, oh my God, I can't work anymore. Obviously it wouldn't last forever, but it gave me a cushion to not worry about money during those initial months.
Yeah, it gave you the space you needed to recover and rest. Where a lot of entrepreneurs and self-starters, they work through being sick. And I mean, God, you almost lost your life, and thank God that you're okay. But fortunately and that's another important point, just on the practical side there, that the thing with YouTube as a platform is that once you put it up there, unless you take it down, it's there forever.
Yeah, 100%. And one of my most successful video to this day, I think I published it 2018 or 2017. And it's been my most successful video. And to this day, you were talking about the YouTube analytics and all that. You know how you can see the reports of your top performing videos. So this day is always on the top 10 of the best performing videos. And that video has continued to generate revenue since it went out, and it probably took me, I don't know, a day's worth of work to create it. And to this day, it's still it's not like I wouldn't be able to like pay my my mortgage and rent and all that like with it, but it's still generating money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to go back to your point about how, your YouTube plaques arrive and then you just shove them under the couch or behind a bookshelf or whatever, and because you don't want to celebrate yourself and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't want the attention on you. You know what? I tell you what it does do, and you've probably realized this then. For people, not just me, other people that watch your channel, that will watch your podcast, because
Mm-hmm.
presumably what I'm seeing right now is what
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
viewers will
Yeah.
be seeing.
100%.
It gives them hope.
Mm-hmm.
It gives them something to aspire to.
Right.
So, even for me sitting here, it would be very easy. It's so easy. There are loads of stats about YouTubers, about podcasters,
Mm-hmm.
especially, about how long it takes before they give
Mm-hmm.
up
Mm-hmm.
because they're not seeing traction, because they're not getting
Yeah.
views or downloads or whatever, or subscribers. And the one thing that I've done with podcasting, not least because I love doing it. I remember Jason Yap, who his podcast is The Background Dancer, and he's based out in the Far East, and he's in Malaysia. He's an amazing guy, absolutely amazing human being. And he was I think he was like the eighth person I ever interviewed.
Mm.
And I just kind of brought it up because I'm very competitive as well. And if I start something, I've got to see it through. And he said to me, "You know what, Bobby, don't get hung up on viewers and downloads and so on."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "The way I think about it with my podcast is that if me putting it out there helps just one person,
Mm.
then it'll have been worth doing."
Right. But it goes back to that one thing, right? Is the audience that matters. You have to help,
Exactly.
so I completely
It's
agree with that.
coming from a place of service. And so, with YouTube, it's I'm finding it harder than the
Mhm.
podcasting. The
Yeah.
podcasting, you and I get to interact, and we get to make a relationship, build a relationship, create a relationship from nothing. Because you and I didn't know each other an hour and
Mhm.
20 minutes ago.
Right.
We'd never met
Right.
before.
Right.
Apart from the fact I felt I knew you a bit because I subscribed to your
Mm-hmm.
channel. And we we get to have this relationship out of it, create this content that hopefully will help people that are listening. Um, and hopefully we have that ongoing connection. I've
Mm-hmm.
offered you help with your podcasting
Definitely.
journey that you're just
Yeah.
embarking on, and I absolutely mean that. You lean on me as much as you need to.
Thank you.
I'm
I
more than
appreciate
happy
that.
to
I
help
definitely, I
because I wish
definitely
I
will.
had someone there. Yeah, when I was
Yeah.
going through it.
Yeah.
Um, YouTube, I'm finding a completely different challenge
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of almost feels really lonely. There's more time involved in terms of having to plan your content,
Mm-hmm.
create it,
Mm-hmm.
edit it, make it look nice, get all of your caption cards the right way so that people want to click on
Mm-hmm.
them because they need to look attractive.
Yep.
And then you kind of put it out there, and then you've got no control really over what
Mm-hmm.
happens after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm finding that more of a challenge. So I would find it much easier to stop putting one foot in front of the other on this YouTube kind of journey that I'm now on. But it's creators like you who have walked the path before me, ahead of me. Yeah, ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I see things like the recognition that you've had, and that is what will spur me to keep going. And I guarantee you it'll be the same for hundreds, if not
Mm.
hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
of your audience.
You know what? And I first of all, I really appreciate that comment, and I hope for that to be true, not only for yourself, but for a lot of other people. That's one of the things that really um inspires me. One of the things I started doing when I first started my YouTube channel was that people, I'm sure this happens to you. Random people would message you and saying, "Hey, thank you so much for whatever it is that you put out there." And I started keeping those notes as motivation because like you might see that plaque now, but this is now, like the first couple years, I had hardly any views, relatively. Like I will do more views today than I did probably my first year put together, you know. Um, and even though the views were not very high, some people did reach out and say, "Hey, thank you. Oh, hey, I like this." And so I would keep that as like motivation to say, okay, there's at least one person in somewhere who's watching this and enjoying it. But then, I wasn't. Again, I will put out more content this month than I did my first probably couple years put together. Um, it's a different context, right? I have a team now. Like this is what I do full time. I was doing that after work, so like it's a different, completely different thing. But something that I did do back then is like I committed to doing, okay, I'm gonna do at least one a month. Like if I can do one a month, that's all I can do, and that's what I'm gonna give it. And obviously I had to sacrifice other things, because I was doing it after work. So from 7 to like 1 in the morning, and I wasn't as fast as I am now. And so again, but I was trying to, I just kept pushing forward. And you mentioned this plaque as motivation for yourself and others. I also looked at other YouTubers, and not even YouTubers, just podcasters and other people who I thought, oh man, if I can ever get to this many followers, it'd be amazing, or views. And like going back to the whole me not like wanting to promote myself. If you watch my first, I don't know, 10 or so videos, I don't even say my name. I don't show my face, or don't say my name, because I wanted it to be about the work, not me.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got to 10,000 followers. I'm no longer like a big social media person. I used to be back 10 or so years ago. But I remember I was a big Facebook user. I was the kind of person that will, oh, here I'm at this restaurant, I'm going to check in, And I no longer do that, but I used to do it all the time. And I remember I got to 10,000 followers, and I was so afraid to share like a screenshot to people that I knew in real life. Because I was like, oh my God, people are going to judge me. Or like, oh my God, people are going to think, oh, 10,000 followers is nothing. So I didn't. And I thought to myself, I'm going to wait till I get to 20,000. And to be honest with you, I probably didn't share it till I got to I think when I got my 100,000 follower plaque, when it came in, I opened the box, took a picture of it, and I did share that. But, it took that long for me to be comfortable sharing, this part, even to this day. I played football every week, and a lot of my teammates don't know what I do. Like I just don't talk. And then it's funny because then just this last Tuesday, I play football every Tuesday night. This last Tuesday, one of my teammates comes along. His name is Jeremy, who's actually from England. He's like, it's like, oh my God, you popped up on my TikTok, because I have a TikTok where I post tutorials. It's like, oh my God, you popped up on my TikTok. And, like, it's so weird. It's like, I know a celebrity, and like, oh, he was super excited about it. And I was like, oh God, like I was just melting inside, because it's such a weird thing,
Yeah, no, totally. God, I wish, I wish I had you like with me sometimes with like some of my friends. Some of them be listening to this, and I don't care. I'll slap you when I see you. But
Yeah.
it's like some of them will be like, "Hey, how's the podcast going?" Yeah, it's going fine. It's growing slowly but steadily.
Yeah.
How many downloads do you get?
Oh my
Well,
God.
that metric doesn't really matter, dude. It's like,
Yeah.
well, how many subscribers do you have?
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't really
Yeah.
check it.
Hmm.
What I'm more interested in is the feedback that I get from my listeners, that the content we're putting out there is helping them.
Yeah.
That's the reason I do it.
Yeah.
Not to mention the masterclasses I get myself as a podcaster. You'll find this out soon enough as well.
Yeah.
Um, but wouldn't it just be great just to kind of like, hey, here's my friend Jesus. He's got a YouTube channel. Oh, really? How's that going? Oh, he's got 2 million subscribers.
Yeah.
What?
Well, you know what?
But that's
It's
not why we do it. That's not why we do
not
it.
at all. And I'll tell you
People
another.
people will be people. You're gonna, when you put yourself out there, suddenly you shine a light on yourself. It's human nature. You're gonna get people that will either cheerlead you,
Mhm.
and you're gonna get people that are gonna try and just kind of knock you a little bit. And usually the reason they're knocking you is because they're just jealous that they couldn't do it themselves.
Oh man, like that whole mentality is just insane. So I got invited to a YouTube event in LA, and at this event, there was only two people who had over 1 million followers, myself and another fashion blogger. Everyone else there is like, oh, hey, how you doing? My name is Jesus. Nice to meet you. How many followers do you have? How many subscribers? How many subscribers do you have? Like how many? And like that, literally, that was like their introduction. And I just kept saying, oh, not that many, not that many, because like that is just totally not my vibe at all. And I just found it like, man, like, wouldn't it be better if like, hey, my name is Jesus. What do you do? I create Photoshop tutorials. Oh, I have a, YouTube channel about cars. Oh, cool. Like, what kind of cars are you into? Like that's the kind of conversations I would rather have than right off the bat, like, oh, you only have 10,000. Okay, cool. Let me go to the next person. And because I got to find somebody to collab with, who's got a big channel. And then we can help each other. And I'm like, no, like, like I'm not that kind. I mean, not to say that I've had people come over to my YouTube channel, but they're more because I've developed a relationship with them and then other cool people, not because they have X amount of followers and I want to reach their followers. Like I'm totally not about that whole, I don't know. It's weird.
I know since I broke that milestone with the podcast, my answer now, because I had it this morning, literally just a few hours ago. Oh, by the way, the reason it's getting so dark over here is because it's nighttime now.
Yes.
And I really wanted to cross over to switch my lamps on, but I'm just so engaged in the conversation, and I didn't want to appear rude, also because I'm
no
brilliant,
worries.
right?
Go ahead and turn it on.
And I didn't want to cross over and switch
no
the light
worries.
on.
You can do it. I have no problem.
I just realized I've just looked at myself for the first time and it looks really spooky over here. I'm not a serial killer. So my answer was I'm not sure, but I know that I help over 500 people a month now and growing
I like
to
that.
live a better life.
I like that.
Is there anything that I can create for you that would help you?
I like that a lot.
That's my answer now.
Yeah. No, it's great. I love it.
Because it changes the tone of the conversation from, snark to, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That is what we're doing.
See, you're a much better human than me. I just like completely like just ignore it. Like my girlfriend always says, because when you're out and about and oh, this is my boyfriend and oh, what do you do? And I always say I'm a graphic designer. And then she always like just like looks at me and she does this like look and she goes, "Is that all?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's all." Like, I don't want to even get into it. And then if it's someone that she really wants to impress, she'll say like, "Well, actually, he does, he's got a YouTube channel with 2 million followers and he also does movie posts." And she'll start like talking me up. And then I realize, oh, okay, this is somebody that she wants that she, I don't know, that not impressed, but that because she's also not like a braggadocious or anything.
Yeah.
So when she mentions certain things, I realize, oh, this must be an important person, because it might be something like one of her old friends that I've never met or something, But the point is that we just had a conversation about this not long ago because where were we? We went somewhere. I think we were at a restaurant together and like somebody next to us started talking to us and I just said, oh, I'm a graphic designer or something. And after the conversation with that couple, she goes, you know what? You always say that. You never mention your YouTube channel. You never mention the whole movie poster thing and all that. I was like, oh yeah, because I want to have a normal conversation. I don't want to necessarily have a conversation about all this other stuff. And if they're interested in graphic design, then we can they'll ask me questions about it and then we can go into it,
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, and let there be light.
And let there be light. I am sorry, and as I got up, my dog. I have 2 dogs and 2 cats, and they're all now patiently sort of waiting there because they think that I'm going to feed them. That's what happens when you bring what did we have yesterday? 4.5 pounds worth of ribeye steak into the house.
Oh my God!
Yeah. So they know that that's going to get cooked up at some point. I think they're kind of angling for it to be done this evening. But yeah, no, look, I don't know that I'm necessarily a better human being because my responses prior to my newfound, okay, well, this is what I do. I'm in service of this many people. Was pretty much like you.
Yeah.
What do you do? I don't even like talking about what I actually do for a day job, but
I don't know in your part of the world, but I'm in an area that I would say California in general, definitely the Bay Area, LA probably more, where we have a lot of people who are aspiring to be quote unquote an influencer.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to a point where I don't even talk about, my social media or any of that. Because to give you an example, I was hanging out with one of my best friends from childhood and one of his friends that I had never met. And it was a young woman in her late 20s. And she was talking about her ex-boyfriend, how he was an influencer and how social media was just overwhelming and he couldn't handle the pressure of being famous. And I was like, oh my God, like who is this guy? Like, and I asked her, I was like, well, like, what does your boyfriend do? And he's like, oh, he's a fitness model. And he's like, lifting weights. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen a lot of those people on Instagram. And I can imagine how having an online persona where your physical appearance is the primary thing, how that could be detrimental mentally. And then
Yeah.
she said, yeah, and he's getting a lot of messages every day, and like all these people want to talk to him, and he just can't handle it mentally. And I'm like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. And I'm like, how many followers does he have? And she goes, oh, he's got a lot. I'm like, really? And then she goes, yeah, he's got about 10,000. And I was like, girl, like that's a narcissist. I'm sorry. Like
Yeah.
10,000, for you to be overwhelmed with social media. No, like if you would have said, I don't know, 100,000, maybe I would have been like, okay. But 10,000, really? I think your boyfriend's just an a-hole. That was just my opinion.
Yeah. Um, it's to answer your question. It's not too dissimilar over here, but it's with a
Okay.
younger generation
Yes.
um, where they're everybody thinks that, or everyone's looking for the kind of magic sauce, or
Hmm.
that thing that everyone's looking to go viral, like
Yeah.
that magic thing that makes them go viral. And certainly in the clothing industry, we see it. I
Hmm.
mean, obviously
Yeah.
in London, I'm sure you've got places in LA and so on where the same thing happens, but it's not
Hmm.
unusual to go around neighborhoods like Notting Hill and so on,
Yep.
where you've got those beautiful kind of
Hmm.
white terraced houses with the pillars
Hmm.
outside and the colored front doors, very Instagrammable,
Yeah.
and very often you'll have a wannabe influencer standing outside or sitting on the doorstep posing with a pout with a photographer friend or whatever, trying to create their content. The middle of Regent Street as well, which is like one of our main
Hmm.
fancy shopping streets in central London. I'm sure when you were here in the capital,
Yeah. Yeah.
you would have
Yeah.
seen it. But again, you see them, and especially at night. If I go on a Saturday evening when it's kind of busy, because people are going to the bars
Hmm.
and the clubs and whatever, down that middle of Regent Street, it will be one after the other, like all the way up. You'll see like wannabe
Yeah.
influencer
Yeah.
with either friends or professional photographer, camera people, kind of doing all their poses. I won't try and do them on video,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, there's a lot of that. Fashion industry, particularly. I mean, that's why
Yeah.
the disposable fashion industry, the fast fashion industry, has
Hmm.
seen
Yeah.
such growth over the last few years,
Yeah.
because obviously you have all these wannabe influencers that are just buying tons of
Hmm.
clothes that they're probably never going to wear again,
Yeah.
just to do their,
The photos.
you've
Yeah.
seen all the funny videos and reels and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. But yeah, it's really funny. I mean, it's like for me, it's like I'm not so bothered about going viral in that I'm experimenting with different types of video content
Hmm.
and so on to kind of see what clicks with people, to see what the audience wants.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really weird as well because you can post something I can post a short on YouTube, not that I've done that many, but there's one I did of, we have a wool fabric from Laura Piana, one of our Italian fabric makers, that's
Hmm.
100% waterproof and stormproof. And when I delivered that coat to my client, I was at his house and he was kind of doubting, how waterproof this fabric was.
Hmm.
And so I turned his kitchen tap on and I said, stick your sleeve under the tap. And the water just bounced off it.
Mm.
Um, I posted that on both Instagram Reels and on YouTube. And it was kind of about level with
Hmm.
engagement.
Hmm.
And then there are other videos where there's one particular video where I did literally just a 60-second on why do your jeans have that tiny pocket? The tiny pocket is
Mm.
just above.
Why is that? I don't know.
It's so back in the day when Levi Strauss first created the first kind of worker jeans.
Hmm.
Um, it was for the carpenters, the workmen, the miners, and someone to put their watch pocket in.
That makes sense.
That's what it's for. And then it was just retained as a feature to this day. Some of the comments on my Instagram have been, like, "Oh, I use it for condoms and, drugs and whatever."
That's
Totally not family appropriate. But yeah, but that's what it's for. But anyway, so it's a 60-second on why do jeans have that tiny pocket?
hmm
And on Instagram, it just like the views just went
hmm
up, 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 and
hmm
it had 14,000 views, which for my channel is a lot.
Yeah.
I only have like 5,000 followers on Instagram, and half of them are Bitcoin miners or crypto people.
But
Um,
but I think that's a valuable lesson right there of the type of you created a piece of content that sparks curiosity not only to people in your niche, but a much broader group of people, including
yeah,
myself. 'Cause it's like, yeah, why do they? Like, yeah, I want to
why do
know.
that? Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So,
that same video on YouTube
yeah.
published. So I think I published it on YouTube first, and then
hmm
I put the same. I let it go for 24 hours, and then I put the same video on Instagram. The same video on YouTube only has 190 views,
Yeah. Yeah. So the same
but
thing happens to me.
14,000 on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Same thing happens to me. So just on Monday, I had a video that did very well on Instagram. Usually my videos don't do this well on Instagram, but I posted a reel, and it at this point it definitely has over 400,000 views. And that's not usual. That's unusual. Uh, Posted the same video on TikTok, also got about 400,000 views. Posted the same video on YouTube, and I don't think it's crossed 40,000 views yet. So relatively speaking, it matches with your story. The numbers may be different, but percentage wise, it's probably about the same.
Yeah,
And I don't know specifically why that is, but my assumption is just that for it, in my opinion, the algorithm that is limiting views, suppressing views, the least at the moment, at least, is TikTok. My assumption is that Reels or Instagram wants to compete with TikTok, so they're pushing Reels more.
yeah,
And from my audience, there has been a lot of pushback, a lot of hate, if you will, with me creating Reels. People don't like it. So I have a sense that as a whole, the YouTube community is just not into Reels that much. That's not to say that
yeah,
there's not viral Reels or that they're not pushing them. It's just that maybe the audience that I built up are just so used to the widescreen format that they just don't care so much about the vertical format. It's my assumption.
yeah.
I wish I knew a clear answer so I can then work around it.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's no. I guess there is no definitive answer because we really don't know
hmm
genuinely. I mean, you hear
hmm
things like,
Yeah.
I hear with Instagram that if you post a reel and a certain percentage of your audience clicks on it and watches it through within a certain amount of time, Instagram's algorithm will pick up on that and say,
hmm
okay, people are engaging with this content. So then
Yeah.
they start to push it out to a wider audience. And then if it continues to, I mean, I think that reel that I did must have featured
hmm
on Instagram's reel page.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, for it to have shot up that much in such a short space of
Yes.
time. But
Yes.
then there's a cutoff point. Um, and then with YouTube, I've just got no idea. But then,
hmm
what do you do? Do you worry about it, or do you just keep creating content?
I,
Going back to your
I
original
would.
intention is that,
Yeah.
I helped 190 people
Yeah.
understand that question
Yeah.
on YouTube, and I helped 14,000 and counting on Instagram.
Yeah.
So put the two
No.
together, and
I,
that's not
yeah.
bad.
Yeah. I
And
agree
whatever's good,
completely.
whatever.
Yeah, I definitely agree completely. Also, something else that I think is important to talk about for people who are listening who want to become content creators of any kind is just because someone doesn't watch your video, it doesn't mean that the content is bad. I talked about packaging, and it might just be like, you know what? what is that little pocket on those pans for? Oh man, it didn't get no views. Well, why not? If we start looking at the analytics that all these platforms provide, in my opinion, some provide better analytics than others, but they all provide analytics. You can say, you know what? The initial hook was not that good, but maybe if I just replace the first 3 seconds with something more engaging and re-upload it, it'll do great. And it's sometimes it's something as small as that. The platform that I like the best in terms of the analytics they show and the ones that are easier to understand, in my opinion, at least, is TikTok. And I've seen a correlation between my videos. For me to consider that a video did well, quote unquote. So on TikTok, I'm close to 600,000 followers. So for me, a video that I consider that does well is like over 70, 80,000. After that, I'm like, okay, whatever number after that I think is good. Any number below that, I'm like, okay, probably it didn't do that well, relatively speaking, to the size of my audience. But I've seen a correlation. So TikTok shows you after the video has been posted for maybe 2 days, they show you a graph, much like YouTube's, where people start dropping off. And I notice a correlation that if I manage to keep 50% or higher of the viewers after 5 seconds, that video will do what I consider well. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into that, of course, for a video to perform well, but that's the one factor that I've noticed based on their reporting for it to be true. If I look at a video and in my mind it did well, it will 100% have over 50% of the viewers still watching after second 5. If a video does, because I just mentioned that I posted a video that did 400,000 and it was great. The video just before that, I don't even think has 3,000 views right now, And I looked at the retention rate, and by second number 2, 50%, it had less than 50%. You know what I mean? So people, the first second didn't like, the second was like, this is crap, and just went to the next video. So we're dealing now with audiences that only give you 2 seconds, And
if they say you need to hook that first 2 to 5 seconds, is so important.
Extremely.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why the tiny pocket video on Instagram did really well for me, because, have I posted it on TikTok? I need to check. The other problem I'm having is actually logging into TikTok. Unless it's on my phone, it's like nothing. Anyway, whatever. But I think because what I did on Instagram, the cover page for it, which would be the equivalent of the thumbnail on YouTube, but the problem on YouTube Shorts is you can't do a thumbnail at the moment for any of your shorts. You can only do your thumbnails for your longer form videos. Whereas on Instagram, you can do a thumbnail. So I did a thumbnail, which was a very attractive, picture of the jean pocket. And then I put the question in bold writing. Why do your jeans have that tiny pocket with the shrug emoji? And that is, when I look at so the 2 videos are exactly the same. One's had less than 200 views on one platform. One's had 14,000 and counting still today. It's going up every day. On Instagram, what's the difference between them? Well, the actual video is exactly the same. The length of time is the same. The content, music, all identical. The only difference is that thumbnail at the start. Because people can see the question on that platform. On the other one, it's whatever YouTube has decided from that 60 seconds they're going to put as the thumbnail. And so it's, again, when you you hit another point, which is that originally we were being taught that the first 5 to 10 seconds were the most important. You've really got to hit it in the. It's actually gone down, like you said, because everyone's attention spans are so damn short. That first 2 to 3 seconds is actually the most important. And so it's what you do there. I'd actually be interested to log into TikTok, post that video, and with the thumbnail, and see what it does.
I mean, my assumption is it will do similar to Reels. At the moment, in my opinion, for my content, they will do about the same. TikTok will usually beat it just by a little bit, but they're comparable. And YouTube is much, much less, like 20%, if that. Lucky to get over, if something gets 10,000 views on TikTok, it'll probably get 2 to 3,000 on YouTube, and it's crazy that happens, but it is what it is. And and something that I like to tell people is it's difficult to not be emotional about this stuff because we are putting our sweat and tears into all the content that we create. And then for it not to do well, it can have an emotional impact. No doubt about it. We're all human. But what I tell people is like after you lick your wounds and you cry for a little bit, really try to be objective and put those emotions aside and just look at the data. For me, if you go back and watch videos that I made on YouTube about 6 or 7 years ago, they're very different than today. Not only has the content been tailored more towards beginners, but the way I present the information. We were just talking about how the initial first few seconds is very important on these short form content platforms, but it is also for longer form content like on YouTube. I went from my videos literally having introductions that were 1 to 2 minutes. I would say something like, hey, my name is Jesus Ramirez. Welcome back to the Photoshop training channel. You can find me. And, like I had this whole spiel that lasted like 20 seconds. And then I might talk about something else. And then I might, who knows? Next thing you know, 2 minutes in, the tutorial has not started. And I realized that at the very least, for the content that I create, people want to go there to do what they search for, how to remove a background. They don't care about my name. They don't care about, my trip to Jamaica last month. They don't,
That's it. Yeah.
They don't care about that.
You make a promise to them.
Yeah.
And then when they press play, you need to fulfill that promise in the shortest time possible.
Yes.
That's the thing I learned recently.
Yes.
And actually I'm now also learning it for podcasting as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. The difference with podcasting is that I can, because each episode I know kind of going in, the meat of this episode was going to be talking about content creation and what we've been talking about for the last half hour or so. But then obviously we have a lot of your story, which is amazing. Thank you so much for being such an open book. But then when I go to launch this episode eventually, I will then listen back to all of this, and then I need to craft the title for the episode, and then the synopsis very carefully to make sure that is matching with what's on the inside of the jam jar. I keep using this jam jar analogy, but it's my favorite one.
It works great. I think it's a great way of thinking about it.
But then again, podcast, it's long form for the most part. So you kind of have that, and people can't really see what they're getting. They, it's listen and you read a description. Whereas with video content, because it's visual, you've got to be so quick and you've got to be so on it.
I think so. And
promise and deliver.
Yeah.
And if you don't promise and deliver, then you're not going to get the engagement.
One of the downsides is that we live in a world where promise and deliver is actually like the barrier to entry now. This is how I like to compare it. I live in, and I've been to London, and it's like this in some of the areas that I've seen, but I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I think I might have mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was on air or off air, but I didn't start drinking alcohol till I was in my late 20s. But I love wine and I love a good cocktail now, and I don't mind spending good money on a good cocktail. The difference between a more expensive cocktail and a less expensive cocktail is really the presentation. They might taste the same, but like if I will order an old fashioned, I want clear ice. If you give it to me in a sphere, I'm willing to spend a couple extra dollars because I'm paying for the presentation and I'm aware of that. And I always tell people, you cannot have a successful cocktail bar in the Bay Area if your presentation is not at a very high level. You just can't. Yeah. And that's how I think of YouTube now, where if you're creating content that's not delivering on the promise, you can't even compete. Like that is the minimum barrier to entry now. So what's the next level? Engagement, hooking people, what I called packaging earlier. How am I going to package this promise that I'm trying to deliver to these people? And I think that's what's becoming challenging for creators now. how to develop a package that not only fits your style, that works for you, that's authentic to you, but that also engages and captures people. I think that's really the most difficult part for creators today.
Yeah. Wow. I my one regret with you is that we didn't get into the your kind of movie, television poster kind of phase of
Yeah.
your career and journey. But
Well,
we're going to do this
I'll
again.
mention something really quickly about it. It's not as glamorous as it seems. It's great when the work is done, but like everything else is just work. There's a lot of chefs in one kitchen, and it's, to me, to be quite honest, I'm not going to say it's not paid well. It's paid really well, but I mostly do it because I really, really enjoy doing it. And I'm not doing it for the money. It pays well, but I'm not doing it for the
Yeah.
money. I'm doing it because when I was a kid, I really, really, really wanted to make movie posters. And I'll give her a shout out. Lisa Carney, look her up online. Lisa Carney has been in the movie poster industry 25 plus years, one of the best in the business, very close friend of mine. She's the one that got me into this kind of work. And I'm 1,000% sure that anyone listening, if you look up her name and just look up her portfolio, you'll see 10 movies that are your favorites that she's worked on. Like, I mean, she's worked on everything. And she's the one that got me into this type of work. And I just wanted to give her a public shout out because she's just an amazing woman and a very dear friend. And having said that, it's work that I like. It's not as glamorous as you may think, but it's something that I enjoy doing because it flexes muscles that I don't get to flex while teaching.
Yeah. Absolutely. Jesus, thank you so much. I mean, you gave so many valuable teaching points there. I don't even know if I'm going to put this out as one complete episode or try and split it up. Anyway, but I've got a few weeks to worry about that. Have you had fun?
Of course, man. I had a great time getting to know you. We had a very good conversation right before we even hit the record button. I'm not even quite sure when you hit it, but I feel like we hit it off right off the bat. And it seems like we have very similar backgrounds. And I'm sure that if we live near each other, we would no doubt be friends enjoying
Oh,
cocktails in London.
100%, 100%. And my open invitation to you stands forever. So
Likewise
yeah.
for you in the West Coast, if you ever make that trip that you want to make.
Oh, we will for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I want to make sure that I'll have this in the show notes as well, but I want to make sure that everybody knows about your Photoshop training channel, which you can find on YouTube. You can either Google Jesus, not Google, search Jesus Ramirez, and it will just come up, or just go directly to Photoshop training channel.
That's right. That's on YouTube. Yeah.
Give me the name of your new podcast.
Yeah, so hopefully by the time people listen to this, my new podcast will be out. It's called Today's Creator, and I'm just going to have a lot of conversations like the ones you and I had with people who create for a living. That doesn't necessarily mean photographers or designers. That could also include musicians, writers, and I'm in a very fortunate position where I've gotten to meet a lot of people from all over the world who put food on the table creating content, so I want to talk to people about the reality of what that is. Kind of like with the movie posters, it's not all glamour. It looks great when you see your work on HBO, when you're watching Game of Thrones or something, but it's the work itself, it's real work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I got to do a quick fire actually before you go. Right, favorite movie poster of all time.
We talked about this before. There's so many good ones. The one that you mentioned was Back to the Future, and that's definitely one that I'll mention because I love it. And I mentioned to you that Back to the Future is a movie that I've seen the most times, but I'm going to have to go with Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. He's standing on top of a building, the sunlight hitting him, and I think his mask is off, if I remember correctly, and looking off to the side. There's a story behind that we'll get into another time, but that
you
one,
can get into it right now if you want. If you've got time.
Yeah, I got time. No worries. I'll make it brief.
Go.
I love that movie poster so much. I'm a big Spider-Man fan. I made it my it's been the only movie poster that I made my screen background on my computer. And at the time, I was living with my parents, and we had a family computer. This is the computer that I mostly used, which was in the living room. And I was away from the computer, but the poster was still on screen. And my mom had a friend over, and her friend said, "Oh, what is that?" And my mom said, "Oh, I don't know. I think Jesus made it," because I was already making art and into all that. And she looks at the movie poster and she goes, "That's too good. I don't think he can make that." And that pissed me off so much. And to be honest, to be fair, at that time she was right, but it still pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I thought one day I'm going to make a goddamn movie poster. Sorry for cursing, but that's what I thought.
No, that's okay.
I'm gonna make a movie poster, and like it's been in the back of my head for that happened like in 2000. I don't know when the movie came out, 2004 or something, and until that day, like up until I made my first one, I was always had in the back of my head that I'm going to make a movie poster just to prove this lady that I can make one, So for that reason, it's also one of my favorites. But in terms of the way it looks, it made it to my desktop screensaver because of that, because it looks fantastic.
Yeah, no, for me, it's always the Back to the Future one. When someone asks me that question, it's the one that is firmly stuck in my mind because it was just so well. I mean, it wasn't just so well drawn, but it just says everything about the movie in that one image. Michael J. Fox looking at his watch with the DeLorean and with Doc behind him looking completely bemused, baffled, whatever. And I think it just evokes some of the better memories from my childhood as well, which were pretty much sat in front of the television watching movies like that. So yeah. Oh God, thank you. God, there's an even longer conversation here between me and you, but I'm going to let you go now. So thank you so much. Thank you all so much for joining Jesus and I today. Hit the share button to send this podcast on to someone you know who could benefit from the things that we discussed on this episode. You can find Tailoring Talk on Instagram at Tailoring Talk Podcast for updates on new episodes, and I love feedback, so email me at tailoringtalkpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to support the show further, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Roberto Revilla. Don't forget to check out the Photoshop training channel on YouTube. Have a great week, be good to each other, and I'll see you Tailoring Talkers on the next one.